Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome everybody over to the stream today. So excited that we finally got a chance to go ahead and go live and talk about some of the latest and greatest comic book news from across the web today over on our stream. Elsewhere, I want to start off today's stream by talking a little bit about some of the comic book reviews that we had over on our main channel. We had the distinct pleasure of talking about the latest issue of Birds of Prey this week. That one was really fascinating as we got to see some of the writing over from Kelly Thompson really switch gears over from the debut arc of the series called Megadeth, as it's starting to switch over to the undercover animal storyline. Plus, over in that issue of Birds of Prey, we also got to see some artwork over from Javier Pina. I think Javier Pina's work is so fantastic at DC Comics. I really enjoyed some of his previous work over on characters like Swamp Thing. Plus, I think the way that that series is kind of utilizing some of their supporting cast and kind of shifting gears, moving away from some of the characters in the main supporting cast like Zealot, and now we're set to switch over to some brand new characters across the DC universe like Vixen. So I really think there's so much change in store for Birds of Prey. And really, our team is trying to investigate this mysterious assassin that has all these ties towards the Red here. So I can't wait to see how the character of Maps or Meridian is set to use some of her abilities that have mysterious connections towards the Green to stop that mysterious killer there. Elsewhere, this was a big week over for Marvel Comics and for the X-Men specifically. We had the Ultimate X-Men, the first debut issue release, both written and drawn from Peach Momoko. I thought that was just a wonderful debut issue over on the channel there. I think we had just a fantastic video review where we were really able to dive into just some of the really epic artwork from that series coming in from Momoko. Also, just one of the quick things I really wanted to mention here as our stream is just set to begin is that we also had a chance to check in on the latest chapter of X-Men. That was issue 32 of the main series. I think Jerry Duggan and Phil Noto are a pretty stellar creative team over on that series right now. I am really loving the way that they are leveraging and using their X-Men supporting cast, especially like in the wake of the really deadly Fall of X storyline that increases the stakes of so many of these X-Men tales. X-Men 32 had so much great characterization for Magik specifically, as she was able to join forces over with Shadowcat and really touch back in with the X-Men's main supporting cast here. All right, well, I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. I think this is a really fantastic stream. We have so much interesting insights about the end of the X-Men's Krakoan era. Plus, we finally have a new date as to when we can expect to see the latest X-Men status quo revealed. I am just so excited about this right now. We've been talking about the X-Men franchise for like over a year now on the channel. So the fact that we're finally switching gears and going to a brand new status quo with these X-Men characters is so exciting. Elsewhere, we're actually going to talk a lot about DC Comics over on our stream today too. DC Comics has some pretty interesting things in store, like a brand new Zatanna series, as well as a really fantastic new Suicide Squad comic book. So please keep an eye out for that here. Good to see you in the chat, AfroSF. AfroSF says, "Greetings, Arakko Braddock. I love Ultimate Marvel. It has an international feel now with Black Panther set in East and West Africa, Spiderman set in North America, and X-Men set in Japan." Yeah, once again, really interesting insight. We're going to be charting so many pieces of the Ultimate line across our stream today. We're going to be going to Africa to check in over with T'Challa, and then we're also going to be touching base over with some of our brand new, X-Men high schoolers with Hisako Ichiki, Armor, and the character of Maystorm as well. All right, so why don't we just go ahead and kick off our stream with our very first news story. This is going to be a super fun, it's going to be a super fast news story. I have a feeling that, some people in the chat might really appreciate this one. I want to go ahead and talk about the incredibly obscure Micronauts characters. So I'm going to read directly from Wikipedia so I can introduce the Micronauts to you, and then I'm going to show you this brand new Marvel Comics piece that's really cool here with some of these characters. So make sure to pay attention. The Micronauts are comic books featuring a group of characters based on the Mego Micronauts toy line. The first title was published by American company Marvel Comics in 1979 with two original characters and characters based on the toys. Marvel published two Micronauts series, mostly written by Bill Mantlo, until 1986, well after the toy line was canceled in 1980. So Micronauts really obscure, really unique property across Marvel, and today the publisher has just released a series of brand new variant covers featuring some of these Micronauts characters interacting with some of the most popular Marvel Universe characters. Without further ado, let's head over to the left side of the screen here and show off some of these phenomenal variant covers coming in from Marvel.com featuring these Micronauts characters. Oh goodness, let's see if I can, okay, perfect. All right, we are all set now. So some of the artwork here is cut off, but I think you can see the vast majority of it here. I just really love some of Mike McKone's work as an artist over on this issue. It looks like this is a variant over for Avengers 13, featuring our Avengers characters in their ultra-modern costumes as well. And we also have some of the Micronauts characters lingering just in the background there. Okay, once again, really cool cover. This one looks like it's illustrated from David Marquez. David Marquez just so clean in terms of like the lines and anatomy here. It's so interesting to see him draw these really obscure Micronauts characters with just such great dimensions across the page here. I also think there's something about the symmetry over on Spider-Man's face that adds like this element of polish, making this cover just look absolutely phenomenal here. Okay, this one is over on Amazing Spider-Man issue 48. By the way, we're going to be talking about the future of the main Amazing Spider-Man series later on in the stream today. I am so excited to talk about the latest issue of that book. Okay, this one is featuring Deadpool. This one, once again, features just great anatomy and just really strong depictions of the Micronauts characters with really interesting reactions towards Deadpool as well. This one is illustrated by Pete Woods. Man, have I appreciated some of Pete Woods' art across the big two publishers here. Even though I'm not a big fan of Deadpool, I think this one just carries so much personality and great expressions for these super obscure characters. Okay, and then we have an issue of Venom. My money is saying that this one is illustrated by Nick Bradshaw. There's something just about the way that he lends a really unique line and perspective to the page. Once again, depicting a scenario that introduces Venom to the Micronauts characters. So crazy, especially with just the insane line work here. All right, let's see if I was right. It looks like I was. Issue 32 of Venom, this variant cover, is illustrated by the excellent Nick Bradshaw. Okay, we have another cover here. I am a little bit familiar with some of the 3D rendering and like the models used here. My money is saying this is illustrated by Taran Clark. And I do think that the signature from Taran Clark at the very bottom right corner of the page is definitely giving it away here. Okay, perfect. We just confirmed that the 33rd issue of X-Men is indeed illustrated by Clark. I believe I've seen him illustrate Storm in the past here. Watching our Micronauts characters fight alongside the X-Men feels like a more natural fit than I would have thought for some of these characters. I also think there's just so much great secondary action for so many of our heroes that Taran Clark is able to render here too. We have Cyclops like shooting up his beam that goes across the page here. We have Nightcrawler teleporting onto the ship, and then Storm also discharging her powers. So really cool cover that has just so much characterization for our individual figures just from a static page alone here. All right, so I just wanted to kick off our stream with some super cool coverage over for the Micronauts characters. I thought it's really cool how Marvel just continues to reference these really obscure characters through variant covers illustrated by some of their best artists across the publishing line. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and talk about some brand new breaking news here. This one I am also super thrilled about, as the character of Zatanna is getting a brand new Black Label comic book series over from DC, illustrated by the incredible Javier Rodriguez here. This one is coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste, written by David Brooke. New DC Black Label Zatanna Bring Down the House out June 25th. In this DC Black Label series for ages 17 plus, Zatanna Zatara is the greatest entertainer in the worst hotel and casino off the Las Vegas Strip. DC Comics has revealed a new DC Black Label series, Zatanna Bring Down the House, which will launch June 25th. Written by Mariko Tamaki and drawn by artist Javier Rodriguez, the creative team will take Zatanna on an all-new adventure in Sin City. So I really think in terms of DC Comics, Zatanna is such an interesting character with a great personality. The fact that she's interested in magic and is able to use all these mysterious words to conjure them just makes her such an intriguing character. I've also really loved Javier Rodriguez's work, starting with some of his interiors that he was able to render towards the main Daredevil series. The fact that he is hopping on board over with the excellent Mariko Tamaki for a brand new Black Label series starring Zatanna, I think is going to be so much fun here. Let's go ahead and see what else Zatanna Bring Down the House is about aside from Las Vegas. In this DC Black Label series, Zatanna Zatara is the greatest entertainer in the worst hotel and casino off the Las Vegas Strip. The ritzier hotels would have loved to have her as a headliner, but since a devastating instance of magic gone wrong changed over the course of her childhood, Zatanna would much rather rock her trademark top hat and fishnets as a sleight of hand stage act than bother with real magic. I couldn't be more thrilled to be working with the team and having the opportunity to tell a story that spotlights Zatanna, said Tamaki. We're very excited for people to see this weird little story, and we've whipped up for their reading pleasure. But Zatanna will have to take herself and her magical abilities seriously when an interdimensional vortex cracks open the very stage she performs on, releasing a terrifying demon bent on killing her. And if Zatanna hopes to escape with her life, she'll have to face even more terrifying consequences of her past. I encourage readers to join us on this journey in search of the magic, said Rodriguez. There is nothing more fun than working on a character like Zatanna, who issue after issue invites you to explore every nook and cranny of the language of comics. The first issue will feature a main cover by Rodriguez, with variant covers by Jorge Jimenez, Alvaro Martinez Bueno, Art Germ, and Mikel Yanin. See your local comic book shop for further details, and you can pre-order the book starting on March 15th. So here's a preview of Zatanna Bring Down the House here. Man, I think this cover is just so interesting and also depicts all of the really fascinating ways that Rodriguez is able to really render characters that have really strong expressions and like secondary activities here. Also, I want to take a look at some of these interior pages within the issue too. Man, the way that this issue kind of references some of the past work of Zatanna with this silhouette in shadow in the foreground here is super ominous as well. And we also have some variant covers for Zatanna Bring Down the House. It looks like this one is illustrated by Mikel Janin. And we also have that Jorge Jimenez cover as well. Really great action shot with the birds flying by Zatanna here. Very candid expression for Zatanna coming in from Jimenez. Yeah, also, this interior artwork from Rodriguez is really matching up with some of the ambition that I was hoping he would bring to the series here. Watching Zatanna go up to this, like, very mysterious, haunted building, super interesting, especially as she appears to be a younger character. This is some of the most experimental artwork I think I've ever seen from Rodriguez as an artist here. I think this double-page spread that we're looking at with Zatanna really matches up with some of the artwork we've seen from Rodriguez in terms of his Marvel projects. Also, really interesting like page layouts, really interesting depiction of Zatanna using her magic, and an interesting window into what her actual stage act might look like here. So, very impressed with what DC has in store for the Black Label line. I really think that Javier Rodriguez is a super ambitious artist. Matching him up with a really like high concept writer like Mariko Tamaki is a great idea here. I think there is so much potential in this Zatanna Bring Down the House story stemming from the excellent interior art and fascinating layouts over from Rodriguez to these really interesting variant covers. I think Zatanna is such an interesting leading woman at DC that has just so much potential in her character. I always love it when DC embarks on solo ventures over with this really interesting, like dark magic esque character that always has a fantastic personality here. Okay, there you go. So that's our coverage over for Zatanna Bring Down the House. I finally have a DC Black Label book that I am really looking forward to here. Okay, next up, we're going to go ahead and start looking into previews of upcoming DC comics. DC's latest Suicide Squad series is actually looking really interesting to me as more time goes on here. This one is also set to introduce DC Comics' upcoming Absolute Power event. Let's go ahead and preview the brand new issue of Suicide Squad Dream Team, introducing a brand new roster of Suicide Squad heroes into the DC universe. This one is particularly interesting too because it's written by Nicole Maines and features the character of Dreamer. I've really loved how at DC Comics, Dreamer has been implemented more and more into the narrative. They're just a really fascinating character that really has just an interesting direction to bring the DC universe in moving forward. The fact too that Dreamer is interacting with characters that are so like core to the DC universe like Harley Quinn really piques my interest, especially as Dawn of DC is starting to turn towards the Absolute Power event at the publisher here. Without further ado, let's go ahead and preview some of just the incredible writing from Nicole Maines and the really interesting artwork from Eddie Barrows on Suicide Squad Dream Team Issue 1. This one is coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste, published 2 days ago on March 8th. A new squad fights for DC's future and the next big step forward, the cataclysmic event of 2024. When Amanda Waller makes her move to seize ultimate power in the DC universe, nothing will stand in her way, not even the future. Spinning out of the events of Titan's Beast World comes the story of Dreamer, the precog Dreamwalker who has run afoul of the most power-hungry villain in DCU history. With a superpowered hero who can see the future on her side, is Waller's Suicide Squad finally unstoppable? Join Harley Quinn, Bizarro, Clock King, Black Alice, and Deadeye for the fight for DC's future and the next big step towards the cataclysmic events of 2024. Yeah, I think it is an interesting roster of characters. Like instead of Deadshot, we have Deadeye. Black Alice, I believe, is relatively new to DC. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. Clock King, also an interesting addition here. Plus, we have Bizarro as kind of a foil over to Superman. And I think it's interesting how the publisher is looking to utilize Harley Quinn in like a main role over in the series to make the roster, I think, feel a little bit more familiar to maybe DC readers who have watched some of the films as well here. Okay, let's go ahead and preview some of the interior art. One thing I wanted to mention about Suicide Squad Dream Team is the artwork from Eddie Barrows is just absolutely phenomenal. I think Eddie Barrows is able to create so much animosity with the facial expressions of the various characters here. Plus, I love how precise so much of his figures are with this really interesting cast of brand new Suicide Squad characters. Especially with people like Clock King just having so much interesting shading like towards like the right side of his face over on the page. Plus, super interesting shot of Dreamer, maybe showing them captured over by Amanda Waller as well. Looks like these characters are on the USS Collins in international waters. Harley Quinn is able to wake up over on the page here and is immediately greeted by Amanda Waller. As you can see, there is quite a lot of exposition on the following page, but I think Eddie Barrows is able to render such a great page layout to make some of these dialogues more interesting to read as the issue proceeds here. I also think the lettering on this issue is phenomenal here, with Harley really reacting with the strong "Hey, what gives" towards the page here as well. Another big reason why I wanted to talk about this particular issue today was it looks like this one also opens up some of the plot threads involving Henry Bendix with Wildstorm. I really wish the DC universe right now was a little bit more acclimated towards Wildstorm, but I know there's at least a couple projects across the publisher. Also, I know that there are so many pieces of DC continuity that are really important to the publisher, referenced in Suicide Squad Dream Team. So I'm really happy to see at least some of those Wildstorm plot threads referenced through characters like Bendix here. I love this final page showing Dreamer and introducing the credits of the series here, introducing the fact that this story is called Wake Up. And once again, we're introduced to Nia Nal, aka Dreamer. She woke up on the wrong side of this storyline here. Okay, so this is DC's brand new Suicide Squad series. I'm so excited about this one, written by Nicole Maines, featuring artwork from Eddie Barrows. Even though this one features Dreamer as a main character, it really looks like it's opening up some dark plot threads across the DC universe here. And man, this expression over from Dreamer on the final page is just so harrowing and builds up a great sense of animosity between her and Amanda Waller. All right, so it looks like DC has a winner in terms of their next Suicide Squad series. Okay, and it looks like we have one more DC comic book to go ahead and preview as well. This one I've been really been reviewing ongoing in terms of some of our video reviews up on the channel here. DC's current Batman and Robin series has really been surprising me with so much fascinating characterization between Batman and Robin throughout the core series. There have been so many events in recent DC continuity that have really fractured the relationship between Bruce and Damian. So watching them reestablish their relationship over the course of Batman and Robin has been a joy to experience. I have really loved Joshua Williamson's writing over on the Robin comic book that was also featured with art from Gleb Melnikov. The publisher is finally opening up some of those plot threads on the main Robin book with Batman and Robin, especially as they're set to bring the character of Flatline back into the narrative. This one is really interesting because Flatline was a great, just romantic interest for Damian in that Robin comic book that was so interesting to read. She had this really violent background and upbringing that is referenced across Batman and Robin. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see how Bruce reacts to the return of Damian's surprise love interest Flatline in the pages of Batman and Robin, issue 7. This one is coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste. Flatline returns. Batman and Robin are on the hunt for Man-Bat and Shush, but their search is interrupted by the return of Flatline, Damian's crush from the Lazarus tournament. But what has followed her to Gotham? So Batman and Robin issue 7 is still written by Joshua Williamson. This one actually features the return of artist Simone DeMeo over on the core series. In the previous issue, I believe we got some art over from Nicholas Messager, who's also just a great artist over at DC Comics. This one colored by Giovanna Nero and lettered over from Steve Wands. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the preview interior pages here. These pages are illustrated once again from Simone DeMeo. I think as Batman and Robin has continued as an ongoing series, this one has really featured some more solid storytelling from DeMeo. I think DeMeo has really grown as an artist. Watching the way Man-Bat is able to narrate some of his animosity towards Batman and Robin towards these first couple pages is just so brilliant here. And just once again, the noir elements on the page add so much additional context. Plus, watching Simone DeMeo render the Batman family here in this gorgeous double-page spread is absolutely amazing. You can see this new storyline in Batman and Robin. It's called Cult of Man-Bat as well. Then we head over to Langstrom himself, addressing some of the worshippers in terms of his cult. I want to read a few choice phrases in terms of what he has to say here. He says, "We are a family, and together we will take back Gotham from the false prophet. I heard your whispers of hope, and you have inspired me. Praise Man-Bat, he hears us. Go forth, follow my orders, and take back our image." And then we have a mysterious character addressing Langstrom in the very final panel here, saying, "This was not part of the deal, Man-Bat." So across Batman and Robin 2, we've really seen Bruce and Damian investigate this mysterious, brand new female version of Hush known as Shush. And on the final page of our preview, we have Shush addressing Dr. Langstrom himself, really analyzing a sense of animosity between these two characters over on the page. Previously, it seemed like Shush and Man-Bat were really working together in terms of Langstrom's really interesting animal-themed like zoo showcase over at DC. So very interesting to see a rift in terms of these two villains at the publisher. I am really interested in where this issue of Batman and Robin is headed next. We are going to have a full review of this comic book this Tuesday over on the channel. I think in terms of DC's ongoings, this is definitely my favorite Batman comic book. And it was actually really fantastic to have Simone DeMeo back on the cover art for this one as well. Not enough people are reading this book. So if you have a chance to check out Batman and Robin, as well as the Robin series written by Joshua Williamson, you owe it to yourself to go ahead and check that one out. Okay, I think we are set to switch over to Marvel now. I'm actually really excited for our Marvel news too. I have been loving Zeb Wells' run over on the main Amazing Spider-Man series for Marvel, but I do think that one of the aspects that kind of holds this series back when it's in certain moments is John Romita Jr.'s artwork. I just don't think John Romita Jr.'s artwork is incredibly modern, and that's where I think Amazing Spider-Man issue 45 is finally going to excel. This one, once again, features writing from Zeb Wells, but his artwork from Carmen Carnero. Carmen Carnero recently drew an excellent Captain America ongoing series. Just the level of detail she lends towards her figures is amazing. She really reminds me of Steve Epting in terms of like Marvel's just really epic artists that just carry the sense of gravitas with their line over on the page here. It's going to be so cool to see what Carnero's artwork for Spider-Man looks like. Plus, the Amazing Spider-Man right now is in a super interesting place. The Gang War storyline just wrapped up, and Peter Parker is trying to pick up the pieces and see what happens next in the lead up to Amazing Spider-Man issue 50. I know the publisher has teased that the mysterious characters of Chasm and Hollow's Eve are returning to Spider-Man, but I think it's too soon in terms of Amazing Spider-Man 45 for them to pop up. So let's see what plot threads this book is referencing. By the way, right from the get-go here, it looks like this one is set to explore some of the ramification from the X-Men line of comic books. There was such an interesting backup story in a recent, really huge issue of Spider-Man where Mary Jane's Aunt Anna actually got taken into Ravencroft because she had taken some of the X-Men's drugs. The X-Men's drugs were recently manipulated by the anti-mutant group known as Orcus, and I think it's just so cool how some of these plot threads from the X-Men characters are spilling into other comic books across the line here. So let's go ahead and see if we can check in on Mary Jane visiting her Aunt Anna over in Ravencroft, as well as check in with Peter Parker in the wake of Madame Mask's epic gang war over in Amazing Spider-Man 45, which once again is illustrated by the excellent Carmen Carnero. After months of chaos in New York City as super criminals of the city have fought over control of the superpowered crime business, the gang war is finally over. Just in time for Amazing Spider-Man to now have to tackle the effects of a different crossover because, you know, comic books. The X-Men's current Fall of X crossover in the CBR exclusive preview of next week's Amazing Spider-Man 45. Just want to quickly say here that this one is written over from Brian Cronin at CBR.com, published 3 days ago. Amazing Spider-Man 45 is still written from Zeb Wells, featuring colors from Marcio Menes, letters from Joe Caramagna, uh, 222. Okay, and with the series' regular art team, John Romita Jr. and Scott Hanna taking a break following drawing the entire Gang War crossover. Guest artist Carmen Carnero, and it ties into the current X-Men crossover known as Fall of X. You see, the Fall of X kicked off with an attack by the villainous anti-mutant organization known as Orchis on the X-Men at their annual Hellfire Gala on the mutant nation of Krakoa. Orchis had developed a backdoor into every human on Earth that had taken the Krakoan medicine, which was millions of humans. Orchis threatened to kill each of these humans if the X-Men did not leave the Earth. Charles Xavier forced most of the population off planet, but a handful of X-Men remained to strike at Orchis from underground, knowing that they couldn't fight them publicly, or else Orchis would kill off the innocent mutants. Orchis demonstrated its ability to kill all the humans who had used Krakoan medicines by first triggering a number of humans, sending them into a brief frenzy. One of these humans was Mary Jane's beloved aunt, Anna Watson. Anna was sent to a psychiatric facility because of her brief frenzy. Recently, the X-Men encountered Orchis' sabotage, and the human recipients of the Krakoan medicine are safe. And so Spider-Man and Mary Jane can now visit a stable Anna Watson. So I really do think that this is probably one of the best covers over from John Romita Jr. that we've gotten on The Amazing Spider-Man in a really long time. The way that Romita Jr. is able to render just some of the rain falling on Spider-Man, I think captures this really interesting elements of noir aspects for the main series. Plus, once again here, just so cool to see all this drama in the wake of Spider-Man wrapping up the gang war as well. Okay, we have our credits page for the series, but I think we're good on the recap because of all the context we've talked about for ASM 45 here. Okay, and we have our first interior page illustrated by Carnero. This one is so beautiful, features so much negative space, and a really great panel bleed over with Spider-Man 2. We also have some strong narration from Peter that I want to read as well. He says, "Feels good to swing around the city a bit, seeing it rebuilding after Madame Mask's war. Maybe we enjoyed it too much. MJ was supposed to be here 5 minutes ago, but now I have to find somewhere to change, away from prying eyes." And then we have a character over on the bottom saying, "Look who it is," over in this patch of negative space. And on the very next page, it's revealed to be Mary Jane over in her jackpot disguise. Also, we have just this really interesting scenario where these two characters are kind of forced to change in front of each other as well. Zeb Wells has been playing up this really interesting kind of love triangle relationship between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, especially because Mary Jane has kind of moved on over with Paul in terms of the narrative. I am really interested with the way Carnero is able to capture the little details on the page. There's all these wrinkles in terms of Spider-Man's costume that makes it look a little bit more realistic. There's just a great sense of shading over on Spider-Man's outfit here too that just makes the page look a little bit more believable and realistic. I think it's a little bit just repetitive to see Spider-Man and Mary Jane talking about their relationship once more within the context of the core Spider-Man series, but at least this storyline has a little bit more context to make this issue a little bit different from some of the previous relationship drama we've seen from these two characters in the past. Also, I really like how this one finally switches gears and introduces us back to Ravencroft as Mary and Peter are able to meet up with Aunt Anna. You know, Mary and Peter have spent so much time with each other, really seeing them engage their relationship in a different context and visit Mary Jane's aunt is just a really nice way to flesh out an interesting plot thread from a previous issue of the core series. Leonard McFarlane says Ultimate Spider-Man is better than Amazing Spider-Man. I want to take a few moments and address that comment. I think that is so interesting right now. So currently, I am still really taken with Marvel's core Spider-Man series. I think this book just has so many more plot threads than Ultimate Spider-Man. This one has been going for 45 issues, but still, I just think the really ambitious way that Zeb Wells is able to manage characters like Randy and Robbie Robertson, as well as Janice Lincoln and Tombstone, Wilson Fisk, and The Rose. I think The Amazing Spider-Man's Gang War was such an epic way to flesh out ASM's supporting cast in a really, really unique way. I would really encourage you to go and check back in on the Gang War before making like those sweeping judgments, because I think that comic book series was a minor work of art. I really encourage you guys to go ahead and check that one out. And also, we will have a full video review for issue 45 of Amazing Spider-Man. Once again, I am just so intrigued by the way that Zeb Wells is able to drop a plot thread like 14 issues ago and then randomly pick it back up when you would least expect it. I've been reading Zeb Wells comic books for over like 10 years, and just the way that he's able to sneak in some of these surprising aspects of plotting always just captures my interest in a really engaging way. Just the way that he always messes with readers and goes left when you would anticipate him to go right has really made The Amazing Spider-Man just so much fun for me to read every single month, and I will continue to review this series until Zeb Wells stops writing it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break here and rest my throat, and then we're going to be back to talk about Ultimate Marvel, Blood Hunt, and the X-Men. I am like so thrilled to talk about some of these final X-Men issues. We'll be back in just a few moments. Okay, I want to thank you so much for sticking with me here, and we're going to go ahead and head directly into the Ultimate Universe in terms of Marvel now. So the publisher is releasing a brand new Ultimate Black Panther comic book series. This one is set to introduce T'Challa back into the fold here and really flesh out his battle against Moon Knight. So this one is written over by George Marston, coming in from newsarama.com. Wakanda is in chaos in Ultimate Black Panther 2. T'Challa takes extreme measures to protect his kingdom in this preview of Ultimate Black Panther 2. Ultimate Black Panther 2 escalates the conflict that started in Ultimate Black Panther 1, with T'Challa scouring his kingdom for whoever is responsible for his father's death in the wake of the attack on Wakanda that happened at the end of the first issue. Now in this preview of Ultimate Black Panther 2, T'Challa and his queen Okoye struggle with some of the decisions the king has made in the time since the attack. which threaten to tear Wakanda asunder. Wakanda bangs the drums of war. After Moon Knight's forces attack the stronghold of Wakanda, T'Challa can no longer resist Shuri and the Dora Milaje's calls to action, reads Marvel's solicitation for Ultimate Black Panther 2. Grieving and enraged, Black Panther demands to know who has been leaking information about Wakanda to their enemy, and the source shocks him to his core. A prophecy about T'Challa threatens to upend the war and all of Wakandan life. Here's a gallery of preview pages from Ultimate Black Panther 2 from writer Brian Hill, artist Stefano Caselli, colorist David Curiel, and letters from VC's Corey Petit, along with the issue's main cover by Caselli and Curiel as well. So, in terms of the Marvel Universe, Stefano Caselli has really illustrated so many of the projects that Jonathan Hickman has worked on. Ultimate Black Panther is not written by Jonathan Hickman, but it's still part of the Ultimate Universe that he helped found over at the publisher. This one is written by Brian Hill, and the first issue of Ultimate Black Panther rendered a T'Challa that was a little bit too close to his 616 counterpart for me to really get as immersed into the narrative as I wanted to. I am really hoping there's going to be something in this preview that's going to set this iteration of T'Challa apart from his 616 counterpart. To be fair, right now, in the current Black Panther comic book, T'Challa has been exiled and is working through Burning T'Chaka. I'm such a big fan of that book, but really what I'm looking for from Brian Hill and Stefano Caselli is something in this Ultimate Black Panther series that's going to rival just that really excellent comic book by Eve Ewing and Chris Allen. Let's go ahead and check this one out here. So it looks like we have Okoye narrating this opening sequence. She says, "For 30 days, Wakanda has lived in fear. I hear them when I am among them. They speak to me. I will," and then we have T'Challa saying, "I will root the rot from our kingdom, Okoye. This war will end." Okoye says, "They are not scared of war. They are scared of you." In this preview, I really think the saving grace here is so much of the expressions from Caselli. Caselli is able to just introduce so much pathos towards this preview that makes it really interesting to read, even though a lot of the narrative here is so sparse on the page. In the next issue, on the next page, we get to check in on so many of these disparate scenes across Wakanda here. It states, "We are searching for other enemies, putting our people behind bars, conducting interrogations. Our people cannot even grieve your father with our trust." You know, when I see this page illustrated here, it almost reminds me of the way that over in John Ridley's Black Panther run, the people of Wakanda started to doubt their king. And I wonder if that's just the natural way that Brian Hill is going to flesh out the future of his Black Panther ongoing series. And to me, that would be way too similar to the 616 issue as a whole here. So once again, I really want to give Brian Hill the benefit of the doubt, but I really want to see T'Challa tackle the forces of Moon Knight here in just a really interesting way. Over on the next page, we get to see the end of Okoye and T'Challa's meeting here, and some of the final elements of their conversation. I want to read Okoye's last line of dialogue. She states, T'Challa says, "What am I afraid of, Queen?" And Okoye says, "What all men fear, that what they are will never be good enough." Across all of these preview pages, we have gotten really strong layouts from Caselli. I think this one is no exception. I especially like how Okoye's face is kind of bleeding into the background, and how this panel kind of serves as the foreground for two different elements of the page here as well. Once again, just on this final page, the way that Brian Hill is able to create so much pathos and elements of animosity between Okoye and T'Challa is really interesting. But once again, I really want to see T'Challa head into a different direction and find a new way to tackle these forces of Moon Knight. I really want to see some elements of continuity that make this iteration of Ultimate Black Panther really stand out from its counterpart here. Really loving the covers across the Ultimate Universe and the way that Jay Bowen has like designed so many of these credits pages here. Just really phenomenal stuff. Okay, so Ultimate Black Panther 2 is set to go on sale March 13th. We're probably not going to have a full issue over on this one. I will keep an eye out for Black Panther, and I think this is a comic book that we are really going to be talking about a lot in terms of some of our streams moving forward here. Just in case I didn't call it out before we leave this news story, just want to quickly thank George Marston and Newsarama for posting this one. Okay, let's go ahead and check in on another element of the Ultimate Marvel Universe here. We have a brand new first look at Ultimate X-Men issue 2. So really quickly, I'm going to give some cursory thoughts over on the first issue of Ultimate X-Men and then explore this brand new chapter of the series, advancing our plot with these young mutants set over in Japan. So Ultimate X-Men was written and drawn from Peach Momoko. The first issue came out last Wednesday, and I had an absolute blast with this comic book. I think the way that Peach Momoko was able to interpret some of the inner thoughts and feelings of her protagonist, Hisako Ichiki, known as Armor, was so beautiful. Just watching some of her alienated feelings towards her other classmates as she goes to the graduation of her middle school is just so wonderful and epic to behold here. I especially loved as like later on in that series we really got to see Hisako battle the shadow as well as some of her own demons involving characters like Tsubasa. Plus, I think the way that Hisako was able to manifest her powers late within the course of that issue with that like oncoming car was just a super epic way to see an X-Men really mount their powers over on the page as well. I know there is still so much to come within the course of this series with characters like Maystorm just on the horizon for the book. Plus, one super interesting part of Ultimate X-Men that I want to talk about here is how these characters are in part of the Maker's Council. They're in part of the world that is ruled over by the Maker's Council. So at one point, maybe our Ultimate X-Men will do battle against characters like Viper that are in the Maker's Council, ruling over this particular area that Maystorm and Hisako are operating out of in Japan. So I really like the fact that Ultimate X-Men has all these like meta-narrative plot threads, and I'm really hoping that Peach Momoko and Marvel will be able to stick to this comic book long enough to get to those really epic storylines and to build out a really interesting team of X-Men. I thought it was so intriguing how in the first issue we just basically got the character of Armor, and that was where we left off. Hopefully, once again here, Momoko will really build the narrative and introduce some other like ancillary X-Men as we continue and get deeper into the narrative of Ultimate X-Men. So I really love this comic book. I think the artwork is so visceral and beautiful and should hopefully just reach a brand new element of Marvel Comics readers that don't usually check in on Marvel Comics. I especially love the fact too that Peach Momoko and the script adapter Zach Davison didn't implement, enough dialogue, or basically had just enough dialogue on the page to immerse a whole bunch of different readers towards the narrative. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and check in on Megan Damore's preview of Ultimate X-Men issue 2 coming in directly from Marvel.com. Afro SF, I think the creepy guy Armor met is the Shadow King. Yeah, I know that is kind of word across the internet, is the mysterious shadow that Hisako meets up with across Ultimate X-Men could be the villainous Shadow King character. I think that would be a really cool plot twist, but if Peach Momoko wants to go in a different direction, I'd be down with that too. Let's see, Afro SF says, got the first trade of Eve Ewing's run, it's good. Oh, in terms of Black Panther, I am happy he's not king though. Ultimate Black Panther suggests that most of the outside world don't know about Wakanda. That's a really good plot twist from Brian Hill, once again, that sets it apart from the main Black Panther book. Also, AfroSF, I'm so glad you checked out the Eve Ewing Black Panther comic book. Man, I am frankly not even caught up on that book. There are not enough people that talk about that book, period. End of story. It looks like those are all our comments. Let's go back to this article. In a special first look at Peach Momoko's Ultimate X-Men 2, Hisako Ichiki finds a new friend in May, aka Maystorm, who is going through some similar changes. Hey, I want to talk about a couple things that just came to mind here as I read through that sentence. So, I believe in the Ultimate Universe one shot, we got some of these preview pages from Ultimate X-Men, and some of those preview pages really like threw me off my game because I think they were later in continuity than where Ultimate X-Men takes place. So I just thought that was such an intriguing, like, different way for the continuity to change across these two different projects that are supposed to be for the same book. So Ultimate X-Men 2 is slated to formally introduce the character of May, known as Maystorm. Maystorm was first introduced on a variant cover illustrated by Peach Momoko and is now set to take on Ultimate X-Men as the like second big supporting character in the book here. In Peach Momoko's Ultimate X-Men 2, Hisako Ichiki heads off to high school, where she runs into a cool, white-haired punk called May, aka Maystorm. Soon, Hisako discovers she's not the only one adapting the strange new abilities, and the two unlikely companions embark on a mission to uncover the mystery behind the creepy shadow who has been haunting and taunting them. A special first look at Ultimate X-Men 2, May approaches Hisako, who is currently struggling to keep her cool. In one page, Hisako and May approach an empty building where the creepy shadow lurks by the window. Inside, they find a disturbing shrine as well as the creepy shadow which turns to face them. They flee, only for May to unleash her powers and push the shadow back, much to Hisako's shock and dismay. So let's meet Maystorm officially in Marvel Comics continuity over in Ultimate X-Men issue 2. Once again here, it looks like we're graded to May and Hisako running down a hallway trying to escape from the mysterious shadow character who may or may not be the Shadow King. Also, really cool to see May manifesting her powers over the course of the debut issue 2. She's got a really cool character design in terms of Marvel heroes as well. Okay, so it looks like Ultimate X-Men 2 is on sale March 10th. Excuse me, April 10th. All right, give me just one moment here and we'll go ahead and get some of these interior pages on the screen. Okay. Okay, perfect. So this is the cover over for Ultimate X-Men issue 2. I really love the creative way that Momoko was able to lay out this particular cover. It really reminds me of comic book artist David Mack. Also, this really interesting expression that Momoko gives, hopefully, once again, should immerse a different kind of comic book reader towards the Ultimate Universe. I know right now there's like so much interest in like manga artists like Junji Ito, and I'm really hoping that maybe some of those readers may be motivated to check out the like horror bend over in Ultimate X-Men, especially as Peach Momoko is an Eastern creator as well. Okay, so this is our very first preview page. The one that we looked at just a few moments ago, I believe, is actually the last one, but Marvel included it just directly in terms of their article here. This is our first meeting between Hisako and May over on the page. Once again, Peach Momoko is able to implement such a beautiful panel bleed over with May as Maystorm. Also, just some of the individual details in her costume design are so interesting to look at and help, I think, Ultimate X-Men feel really unique in terms of other books being published at Marvel. Okay, on the second page, we get some smaller expressions for characters. One thing I love that Momoko does is kind of switches between, like big expressions with full realized facial details, as well as smaller ones with tinier panels that just focus on smaller eyes and mouth expressions that really make our characters feel so relatable across Ultimate X-Men, and the really subtle way that Peach Momoko is introducing these elements of horror through a visual motif with the shadow character kind of staring at Hisako and Mei through a window. So ominous. And I especially like the gaze of this eye in the very final panel of the page as well. Yeah, such great designs and layouts from Momoko here too. I think this is a little bit more ambitious than what you would see with like your average Marvel comic book in terms of how many just small panels are on the page to build up the intrigue and tension in terms of the story. Looks like over in this scenario here, we have Mei and Hisako maybe taking a policeman over to investigate the shadow character. I'm wondering if the shadow is going to get aggressive towards the policeman, maybe in order to freak out and terrify the characters of Mei and Hisako here. Also, really cool how the color palette for Ultimate X-Men can really change on a dime and lose out on some of the color once again to heighten the tension of some of these scenes as well. And this was the page that we looked at in the main article for the series. Once again, this one has a great layout as well with some beautiful panel bleeds and just really interesting once again to see May Storm in action with some of some of her powers, being that she's such a new character in terms of the Marvel universe. Okay, so I can't believe it's going to take so long for Marvel to finally release Ultimate X-Men issue 2. This one isn't set to go on sale until April 10th here, but I'm really looking forward to this one, reintroducing characters like Maystorm back into the narrative and hopefully fleshing out a more ambitious future for Ultimate X-Men. I really like the way that the first issue had a slow pace, but I'm really ready for Ultimate X-Men to pick up the pace and just show what the rest of our team looks like. So eventually, Hisako and Mei will be able to battle some of the Maker's Council. Okay, so that was Ultimate X-Men issue 2. Frankly, I want to quickly switch over to the Blood Hunt storyline coming in from Marvel Comics. But very quickly, I want to do so by bringing some of the elements of Ultimate X-Men with Peach Momoko's artwork. We have a brand new cover for Blood Hunt of the upcoming Marvel Comics event centered around vampires with just a wonderful illustration by Peach Momoko depicting the character of Vision. Very cool to see Peach Momoko's kind of horror bend applied to the character of the Vision as well. Afro SF says, I hope this book finds a brand new audience. It is a teen horror drama for girls, but I still enjoy it. Yeah, I really hope Ultimate X-Men will be able to appeal to a much wider audience than your typical Marvel comic book. You know, this one is centered around girls, but there is such an interesting supernatural element to it that should still appeal to a male audience. Eventually, I think Ultimate X-Men probably should introduce at least maybe one, maybe two male characters, but I think it'd be really cool if you kept the cast primarily female as well. Yeah, this one I really hope is hopefully going to bridge the gap between comic book audiences and maybe just introduce people who check in on comics once, twice a year. Hopefully, they'll be able to read that book and get interested in some brand new X-Men characters too. Okay. I think we're going to talk about this story very briefly here. Once again, Marvel Comics, a vampire storyline called Blood Hunt is set to be published very soon. It looks like the publisher recently revealed a couple of brand new villains for the storyline. I think it's so interesting that Jed MacKay created the Ashen Combine and also has these Blood Hunt Coven characters. A couple of them have really cool designs too. I actually like the vast majority of them. We have Bloodstorm 1, Megrim, Unusual, Smoke Eater, Damascene, and Cruel. I guess what I'm worried about in terms of these Blood Coven characters introduced for the Blood Hunt is the fact that they may just fall into obscurity very shortly after they're introduced. I don't know if this storyline really has the staying power outside of the really strong creative team of Jed MacKay and Pepe Larraz. Frankly, I really like Jed MacKay and Pepe Larraz as creators, but I just think the idea of a vampire oriented storyline right now in terms of Marvel is a little bit derivative, especially because of the fact that we haven't had like a big book in terms of Marvel's continuity to set this up. I did have the opportunity to preview a recent interview with Jed MacKay talking about Blood Hunt, and he really stated that there's some plot threads from Moon Knight as well as Doctor Strange that are set to tee up this miniseries and create a little bit more connective tissue towards Blood Hunt and the rest of the Marvel Universe. I also think the artwork in Across Blood Hunt is probably going to be really phenomenal as well from Larraz, who illustrated just the amazing House of X comic book from Marvel. But once again, here, I'm just a little bit tepid, and I'm maybe going to hold off covering this storyline in a lot of depth until we have the first issue officially underway here. It looks like we won't have to wait too long, as the first issue of Blood Hunt is set to go on sale May 1st from Marvel Comics. By the way, this one is a 5-issue miniseries, and it is illustrated by Marte Gracia, who's just a wonderful color artist across Marvel Comics as a whole. All right, so I just wanted to quickly shout out our brand new team of villains introduced to Blood Hunt with the Blood Coven. We have one more very quick news story centered around Blood Hunt, and then we're going to head directly into the X-Men to close out our stream. So this one is coming in over on March 8th from Marvel.com. Jed MacKay reveals grisly new details about Blood Hunt. Check out new Blood Hunt reveals straight from a special before-seen conference, including a lettered preview and never-before-seen covers. Okay, let's go ahead and preview some of these brand new covers as well as the Pepe Larraz interior artwork. I think this cover from Jesus Says is absolutely phenomenal here, spotlighting so many disparate characters across the Marvel Universe. Once again, we have like our very ultra-modern looks for characters like Tony Stark and Scarlet Witch. The framing of this over from Jesus with a blade towards the left side of the screen is so epic here. Would really love to see Jesus Says work on like more movie collage-esque cover posters here. I think this is just beautiful. Tony Daniel. I've really liked some of Tony Daniel's work in the past. This one definitely not as detailed as what we saw with Jesus Says, but we really get a strong sense of composition here across some of the different characters. And I'm also liking some of the anatomy featured for Black Panther as well. Here is Avengers 15. This book is going to have a special place in my heart in terms of the covers because the excellent Joshua Cassara illustrated this one. Also, I'm loving the brand new Avengers cast of characters with like Hercules and Kate Bishop too. This book definitely needed something to set it apart from past installments, and I'm hoping that the new roster will allow yet another Jed MacKay comic book to find some greatness here. This one illustrated by CF Villa, but features a cover from Cassara. Rez says they really struggle coloring Wanda. Oh, really interesting call out there. I think I actually agree with you. Okay, Doctor Strange 16. So for me, this is a pretty interesting Blood Hunt tie-in because this book is really instrumental to the core Blood Hunt narrative. Plus, I think some recent issues of Doctor Strange have been nothing short of wonderful. There was just such a great follow-up with the character of Bats, as well as, I believe, Steven's brother Victor. Really cool stuff going on in the course of the main Doctor Strange narrative. Issue 16, it looks like, is illustrated by Pasquale Ferry, featuring a cover from Alex Ross. Pasquale Ferry's art is so cool. It's so animated and sleek, and really should accommodate Doctor Strange issue 16 nicely. Okay, so Vengeance of the Moon Knight, I have recently, got back in touch with and read some of the individual issues. This book just has such a wonderful tone and is probably one of my favorite Jed MacKay ongoings. I am so thrilled about the fact that this one is set to reintroduce 8 Ball back into the narrative. It looks like he's encountering a really violent scenario here as well with this character. Vengeance of the Moon Knight 6, it looks like features our regular creative team of the series with Alessandro Capuccio on art and Jed MacKay on the writing here. God, I saw this image that Alessandro Capuccio posted out, I believe, on Twitter the other day of a new Vengeance of the Moon Knight interior page. It was amazing. There was so much detail in his artwork, and I really haven't appreciated just how detailed some of his line work is until I'm able to see it in black and white as opposed to color. Okay, frankly, I am still excited about a lot of the Marvel tie-ins to Blood Hunt, even though I'm not as big over on the main series. Okay, so we've talked about everything over on the stream except for X-Men. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and discuss the upcoming relaunch for the X-Men. Marvel Comics has officially given us an exact date as to when we can expect more details about the upcoming launch in the post-Krakoan era. Here's a look over at the brand new era of Ultimate X-Men, set to be announced March 14th at South by Southwest. So this is the future of Marvel Comics X-Men and digital comics. This one, once again, March 14th at 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. CT in the Austin Convention Center, room 9AB. Join Marvel Comics Editor-in-Chief C.B. Cebulski and VP Executive Editor Tom Brevoort to be the first to learn what's coming next from Marvel's X-Men comics this summer, when everything you know about mutant kind will change in X-Men From the Ashes. Hear directly from some of today's most influential and groundbreaking comic book creators on how they plan to evolve the X-Men mythos and launch this new era. And in a broader conversation about the evolution of print. Okay, we are not here for a broader conversation about the evolution of print and comics. We are absolutely here to talk about X-Men From the Ashes and the brand new, continuity nuggets that'll set up the next 4, 5, 6 years of X-Men comics. There is so much writing on this one panel from Marvel. I am absolutely ready to see what else they have in store. One other thing to talk about in terms of this panel here is who is on the panel. As you can see, we have the incoming editor for the X-Men line, Tom Brevoort, C.B. Cebulski, Marvel's editor-in-chief, Dan Crothers. I don't know if we can draw any conclusion with that individual, but the rest of them we can. We already knew that Gail Simone was headed to Marvel Comics. I believe she's attached to the X-Men From the Ashes Free Comic Book Day issue. I am really thrilled to see Simone head back into Big Two Comics in a big way over with the X-Men titles. I believe that some of her past writing on books like Secret Six should really help inform the way she writes future X-Men books. But we have a writer who I have not expected to see attached to this panel that I haven't heard announced in terms of any X-Men comics, and that is Jed MacKay. So as we just looked at in that previous article stemming around Blood Hunt, Jed MacKay has so many ongoing comics being published at Marvel right now between Doctor Strange, Vengeance of the Moon Knight. He's also writing an entire comic book event. I know some Marvel writers write their comic books like well in advance of when they're published, but I really wonder if Jed MacKay is set to be one of the brand new incoming writers of the X-Men for Marvel. If he was, frankly, I think that would be cause for celebration. There is so much of what Jed MacKay has done with ancillary characters at Marvel that have been wonderful. We've already talked about Moon Knight. We talked about 8 Ball. There's been such wonderful elements of a personality for like Tigra in the main Moon Knight book. Also, I think that Jed McKay was so wonderful at writing Clea in the main Strange series. I really think that some of that ability and some of that really strong way that McKay is able to interpret characterization could be a really natural bend for him to write the X-Men characters. Like, I really think, some of the Hellions or Dark X-Men characters could be a really great arena for him to join in. I could really see him writing like some X Force comics too, and maybe following up on what the main X Force title is doing with Beast in the core series. There's a lot that I could definitely see Jed McKay doing, and especially because I think he's probably really close with Tom Brevoort since he's been writing the main Avengers book as well. So I can't imagine they wouldn't want to tap on him to join some kind of Marvel comic book in terms of the X-Men. I just wonder what his schedule is going to look like. Rez says, back to the mansion, I guess. Oh man, Rez, if we are back to the mansion, I will be so upset. I really think the X-Men need to find some interesting new oasis, somewhere where they haven't gone before. I don't know if the X-Men have ever had a base in outer space, but that's really what I'm looking for. Maybe, the entire X-Men could find their home on Arakko. I really want like a big, sweeping new change to happen for the X-Men plotline. I really want them to stay out of the mansion and away from a more back to basic status quo. I feel like during the Krakoan era, the X-Men comics became really cohesive, and it's really up to Tom Brevoort, CB Cebulski, and the rest of Marvel's publishing line to keep all those elements intact so I can just continue to be as big a fan of the X-Men franchise as I currently am. At least we won't have to wait very much longer. Okay, so it looks like we also have a preview into what the future of the X-Men franchise is going to look like after Krakoa. So Marvel recently released a brand new miniseries, or they recently revealed a brand new post-Krakoan miniseries. This one is taking place well into July, which is set to be the X-Men's From the Ashes relaunch here. Without further ado, let's check in on the future of Krakoa with X-Men Heir of Apocalypse. X-Men Heir of Apocalypse searches for Apocalypse's successor. Steve Fowkes and Netho Diaz are set to take on a 4-issue Apocalypse series on sale this June. Before the X-Men enter a new age this summer, a challenge must be held to determine who will inherit Apocalypse's sacred responsibility in X-Men Heir of Apocalypse. Written by Steve Fowkes and drawn by Netho Diaz, this 4-issue limited series kicks off in May and sees the X-Men's former archenemy gather 12 mutants for an epic tournament to discover who is fit enough to take his place. After trials that test the heart, mind, body, and soul, one will emerge boldly to follow in Apocalypse's mighty footsteps. So this one for me, incredibly exciting. I think first off, we have a really strong creative team. Steve Fowkes is working on so many X-Men comics across the line here, and we're just adding one more with X-Men Heir of Apocalypse. Netho Diaz, I've been a big fan of for a long time at Marvel. I think Netho Diaz really illustrates just really solid work and has a wonderful rounded line. Really interested to see him join up with Fowkes for this really interesting series that is kind of set to coincide with the beginning of X-Men From the Ashes. Throughout the Krakoan age, Apocalypse underwent a radical transformation from supervillain to revered mutant leader. More invigorated than ever before, Apocalypse returns to Arakko to steer his former homeland towards a new destiny. But his work on Earth still needs to be done, especially in the wake of Krakoa's brutal fall. Who will he choose as his successor? A mix of icons, fan favorites, and villains. The 12 mutants in the running are: we have Armageddon Girl, Cable, Cypher, Emma Frost, Exodus, Forge, Gorgon, Mirage, Mr. Sinister, Penance, Richter, and Wolverine Laura Kinney. We really have a great cast of X-Men, centered around trying to take Apocalypse's, heir. The idea of pitting like Emma Frost together with heroes like Exodus, as well as Gorgon from Hydra. Really interesting context here. I'm also loving the addition of Richter. And it's going to be very formidable, too, to see Mr. Sinister also compete in the competition. The shadow of apocalypse has loomed large over not just the Krakoan era, but a substantial percentage of the mutant focused storytelling since its debut in 1986. These past few years have shown so many new facets of Ensab and Nur, and my Krakoan peers aren't done with him yet. So it's both an immense honor and a ton of pressure to step up to the slab for Era of Apocalypse, which charts a new path for his legacy in the years to come. Watching Apocalypse really reform throughout the course of Krakoa and actually join forces with Storm to battle Genesis towards the end of the Genesis War in X-Men Red was nothing short of epic. The fact that Steve Folks is kind of following up on some of these plot threads from Krakoa for this Era of Apocalypse miniseries is way more than exciting for me. I've been lucky to bend the ear of past and future stewards of these characters to make sure these 4 issues are a meaningful entry in the Apocalypse canon. And I have every X-fan's dream task of selecting 12 mutants from across the history of the franchise who might just be up for the titular role. Some characters I've already had the privilege to write. Some are characters I've eyed enviously. And some won't survive the series, but only one will become the heir of Apocalypse. This is kind of similar to the Century comic book currently ongoing at Marvel 2 from Jason Liu. I lucked out tremendously getting paired with Neto Diaz. We have a large cast and he makes spotlighting them all look easy. This book has some of the biggest action I've written in my Marvel career, and I can't wait to see Neto bring it to life. Yeah, another interesting thing too is Steve Folks also tapped on like a very small, disparate team of mutants to help Professor Xavier in Dead X-Men. So definitely seeing at least a few pieces of connective tissue between Dead X-Men and Era of Apocalypse. For centuries, Apocalypse tested the mutants of Earth to guarantee that only the strong would survive. Now, as he takes his throne on Arakko, another must rise in his place and ensure the mutants of Earth do not grow weak in his absence. 12 mutants chosen from the X-Men's greatest heroes and villains will compete for the honor, but only one will become the heir of Apocalypse. So here's our cover on the first issue. The way that we see so many of these villains or so many of these characters from across the X-Men universe like descending upon Apocalypse is just incredibly epic, and just great sense of perspective on the cover too. This is the first issue of X-Men Era of Apocalypse. I want to quickly shout out here the cover from Dota Akande. I believe we saw Akande previously work on an Iron Man book. So the fact that Marvel's lining him up for some of these Era of Apocalypse covers is really, really cool. Here's our second issue of X-Men Era of Apocalypse. This one features so many members of our cast laid out in a really cool symmetrical way. The way this one is laid out is kind of reminding me of how David Marquez is able to paste some of his pages and covers too. Really fantastic work. Here is X-Men Era of Apocalypse issue 3. This one is set to bring Angel back into the book, and it looks like he's kind of manifested as Archangel as well in terms of his battle with Apocalypse. And it looks like this is the final issue of this series, showing Apocalypse standing triumphant over all of his heirs. I wonder if he's still going to pick one, despite the fact that they are all kind of littered across his feet. This one is set to go on sale July 31st. Marvel also recently had a teaser image for X-Men From the Ashes, and they teased that series is set to release over in July. So I'm wondering how X-Men Era of Apocalypse is going to coincide over with that storyline. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about one of the very, very final Krakoan comic book issues here. This is X-Men issue 35. Give me just one moment. We're going to put this one up on the screen. This is a giant-sized grand finale Krakoan storyline here. We need to give it the center stage it deserves. X-Men 35 ends one mutant milestone and steps towards the next. This June, creators from the X-Men's past and future come together to bid a final farewell to the Krakoan age in X-Men 35, the milestone 700th issue of Uncanny X-Men. This one is coming in from Marvel.com, published on March 6th. In July 2019, the world of the X-Men was shattered and reborn on Krakoa in visionary writer Jonathan Hickman's House of X. In the years since, fans have experienced a golden age of mutant storytelling filled with bold ideas, astonishing character developments, and revolutionary new takes on the mutant metaphor. You know, honestly, I feel like in probably a lot of Marvel's press releases, they're absolutely blowing smoke. But I really think that the way they're describing the Krakoan era here, by referencing it as a golden age of mutant storytelling filled with bold ideas, astonishing character developments, new takes on the mutant metaphor, totally agree with all of it. And I think a lot of that was achieved through Krakoa as well. Now, the next seminal shift in the history of the X-Men is on the horizon. But first, Marvel Comics proudly presents the final act of the Krakoan age this June in X-Men 35. X-Men 35 will be the milestone 700th issue of Uncanny X-Men and will feature an epic-length story by acclaimed writers and artists who shaped the Krakoan age. So this one is still written from Jerry Duggan, but we also have writing from Kieran Gillen and Al Ewing. So Kieran Gillen and Al Ewing, I believe, are both set to leave the X-Men offices once both of their respective X-Men miniseries have wrapped up. I am absolutely devastated. I am so sad to see these two creators go. I think like alongside Cy Spurrier and Jerry Duggan, Krakoa's just X-Men as a whole has never been better than at that point where there's four writers we're kind of collaborating together. I am devastated that we're losing two, but I hope we keep the others. Also, it looks like in terms of the artwork for this series, we're also getting some interesting line work from Lucas Wernick and Joshua Cassara, two creators who I've loved in so many instances across the X-Men's Krakoan age. And I think this issue will probably have a lot of people talking because it looks like it has a story from Chris Claremont. Let's see. So Claremont is set to offer a glimpse of things to come in the new X-Men titles launching this summer. It's a landmark issue for one of pop culture's most beloved franchises. Yada, yada, yada. All good things must come to an end, and as a good thing as the Krakoan era has been for mutant kind, the time has come at last. The tragedy and triumph of Fall of the House of X, the madness and mystery of Rise of the Powers of 10, they have all come to their end and led to this moment that will change the future of mutant kind for years to come. On closing out this groundbreaking period of the mutant mythos, senior editor Jordan D. White shared, "Being a part of the Krakoan experiment has been a true thrill. Honestly, in many ways, it echoed the experience of mutant kind itself in the era. We worked differently, tried new things, survived incredible experiences. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have worked with such fantastically talented creators throughout the era, and having worked on the glorious end is truly bittersweet. I will miss it with my whole heart, but I do know Krakoa will live on with us forever." Okay, it looks like we have even more talent on this X-Men issue than what we've discussed here. In addition to all the writers we previously talked about, it looks like incoming writer Gail Simone also has a story in X-Men 35. So interested to see what that one is going to be about. In addition to Joshua Cassara and Lucas Wernick, we also have Phil Noto illustrating X-Men. I've loved his issues. I've actually gotten a couple people in comments of recent X-Men issues stating that they don't like Phil Noto's art. And it just absolutely makes me rack my brain because I think the way that he's able to illustrate some of the expressions from characters written by Jerry Duggan are just amazing. Jerome Pena, man, Jerome Pena, such a great creator over at Marvel. I hope he's able to draw one of the stories from like Gail Simone or something that's going to set up the future of the publisher. Hey, look, one of our favorite collaborators with Jonathan Hickman, Stefano Caselli, is also stepping up to the plate for some art on this one, alongside super cool legacy creator Walter Simonson. Super cool to see him on this one. Lionel Francis Yu, God, I've been loving Lionel Francis Yu's artwork since 2007, and it's 2024 now. We already have talked about how the wraparound cover is illustrated by Pepe Larraz. Check out superstar artist Pepe Larraz's wraparound cover now. Continue to witness the final epic moments of Krakoa in the pages of Follow the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10. Stay tuned in the coming weeks to learn what we will about Rise from the Ashes. Rez says, I love Phil Noto. Thank God. Thank God for you, Rez, that we have somebody here in the chat who can appreciate Phil Noto's wonderful work. Okay, so we have one more X-Men preview that I'm going to touch on very briefly, and then we're going to head into X-Men Monday and close things out for the day. Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. Let's go ahead and talk about Kamala Khan's latest comic book series. This one is coming in from David Brooke on adventuresinpoortaste.com. This is Miss Marvel's second X-Men series as a mutant called Miss Marvel Mutant Menace. This one is also set to introduce brand new plot threads from the X-Men to Miss Marvel, with characters like Mojo, Spiral, and Lila Cheney really breaking things up here. I like some of the elements of the first issue of Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace, but I do think that the first series was a lot more ambitious. I am hoping that in the subsequent installments, both Iman Vellani and Sabra Pirzada, the writers of the series, will be able to create more stakes and introduce a more interesting story with Mojo kind of centered against Kamala. This one written by David Brooke on AIPTcomics.com. Courtesy of Marvel Comics, AIPT can exclusively share a preview of Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. Now, this is issue 2, not issue 1. Due out on April 10th, the series launched this week as a solid first issue, or as I put it, there's a lot to love in Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace, especially if you're an X-Men and or Miss Marvel fan. Both camps should enjoy the supporting cast and inclusion of X-Men related villains and heroes. You can't go wrong with a well-written Miss Marvel, plus great Deadpool and new character sightings. This issue features 2 key villains fans won't want to miss, Mojo and Spiral. Now that Kamala is very notably and very publicly an X-Man, she's attracting all sorts of attention. And you know who uses attention as currency? That's right. It's the return of the X-Men's old media mogul mastermind, Mojo. So, Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace 2, still written from Pirzada, and Miss Marvel herself from the MCU, Iman Vellani. We have pencils and inks from Rob DiSalvo, colors from Eric Arcienega, letters from VC's Joe Caramagna, and it looks like the cover on this one is illustrated by Carlos Gomez. So in the last issue of Miss Marvel Mutant Menace, Kamala was introduced to the character of Lila Cheney, mutant pop star. Very interesting to see this brand new scenario for the characters. And I'm also really appreciating how fluid the artwork from Rob DiSalvo is in the book, and really fleshing out the interior and just location that Kamala is in here. Looks like Lila Cheney might be the person introducing Kamala over to the character of Mojo, if some of these final panels are any indication here. We have Lila Cheney meeting up with Spiral in some of our final panels of Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace 2. For me, this is an improvement over on the first issue. I am loving all like the disparate X-Men characters and the way that this book is really kind of pushing so many fascinating scenarios towards Miss Marvel so early in the run. I feel like there is so much potential in Miss Marvel battling Mojo for her to grow as an X-Men character, and I really hope Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace issue 2, will find a way to show and really track Miss Marvel's progression. All right, so that was a very brief look at Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace 2. Let's go ahead and close out our stream with X-Men Monday. This is Adventures in Poor Taste's weekly X-Men column. This one is focusing on X-Men writer Steve Folks as he talks about some of his recent X-Men projects, including Dead X-Men, X-Men 97, and X-Men Blood Hunt Psylocke. Welcome, X-Men fans, to another uncanny edition of X-Men Monday at Adventures in Poor Taste. We're officially in March, and that means bringing the highly anticipated premiere of X-Men 97. Let's see, so it looks like X-Men 97 is set to premiere March 20th, but Disney Plus won't be the only place you can find the beloved animated X-Men cast this month. 1 week after the new animated series debuts, head to your shop for the official X-Men 97 prequel miniseries of the same name. And also, it looks like this one is said to explore some of the upcoming Steve Folks books with comics like Dead X-Men and X-Men Blood Hunt Psylocke. Okay. Let's go ahead and pick this one up here. Adventures in Poor Taste asks Steve Folks, who was your favorite character on the 90s cartoon from the X-Men, and did you have a favorite episode? Steve says, it's no secret I was a Cyclops kid. I have a tattoo of him. I made sure to write him in the first annual I did in case I never got to do more. I always related to Scott being a little fussy and driven by the books than Wolverine's more rebellious charm. A big part of the appeal of the show for me were the cameos. I've always been the kid skin in the background to spot characters who look cool or familiar. The Genosha arc in the series was a favorite for that reason, with Richter and Sunfire making early impacts on me. Now I've gotten to write both for a bit. Yeah, I had no idea that Richter and Sunfire have some cameo appearances in the original X-Men animated series. As for episodes, Weapon X Lies in Videotape was a favorite of mine for the Black Ops vibe. Still wild that title got approved. I also vividly remember thinking the Nasty Boys were a much bigger deal than they were because of Season 2's sinister stories. And the Phoenix Saga and Dark Phoenix Saga were my Roman Empire as a kid. If I missed an episode while airing, I was despondent. Fast forward to the not too distant past, how did the opportunity to reteam with your X-Men 92 House of XCII collaborator Salva Espen on an X-Men 97 prequel miniseries come about? And how would young Steve feel knowing he gets to bridge the gap between the two X-Men animated series? Steve says, I had such a blast working with Salva on House of XCII, which was a love letter to the 90s animated show, if technically in its own distinct universe, as I understand it. Budamayo and the X-Men 97 team got a chance to check out House of XCII and asked for Salva and I to team up again for this official prequel. Obviously, it's a huge honor and was a no-brainer heck yeah when our editor, Jordan D. White, reached out. Here's the thing, I've been working for publishing for almost 15 years if you count my internships. I've been writing for over a decade and my stance has never changed. I have things I hope to do, but I never expect anything that's out of my direct control. So every X-Men project I've been able to touch has been its own little dream path come true because the franchise meant so much to my life path. Knowing that I'm a tiny part of the fabric of the cartoon that set me on the journey in the first place is something I will always hold close to my heart. To write a prequel, you've at least got to know a few things about what comes next. So, have you been able to watch any of X-Men 97, or were you just given key scripts or plot points? What can you share about the process? So Steve says that Bu and his team were super collaborative and generous in giving us the tools we needed to tell a strong standalone story that feeds into the upcoming Marvel animated series neatly. We had a few long calls where we laid out their plans, and I got to read several scripts to get a feel for where the characters would be as the show opened, as well as where they were headed just after. It was great to have that sort of access and for Bu to toss additional plot beats we could fill in and help set up. But I'll be watching for the first time next month along with everyone else. And what can you share about the actual story that unfolds throughout your 4 issues? Is it safe to assume we see the beginnings of Jean Grey's pregnancy, Bishop's return to the X-Men, maybe even Storm getting a haircut? Any special cameos? Steve says the goal of our story is to bridge the ending of the original show where things kick off in X-Men 97, which will include a couple of the specifics you asked about above. Without giving too much away, we're going to show a bit of where the world at large currently stands on mutants, as well as shadowy forces who may want to change their perception. Key villains of the cartoon will have their backstories fleshed out here, important team relationships get put under the microscope, and some of the small things between the original show and X-Men 97 get a little more explanation in the pages of our story. Plus, we get to introduce a few of my favorite 90s villains into the world of X-Men 97. As for cameos, anyone who's read House of XCII knows I can't resist. But we are a bit more focused on the main cast here. There are nods if you keep your eyes peeled. Okay, let's see what else we can find about this one here. 2 quick fan questions for you. First, X-fan Frederico Nader pointed out that the animated X-Men have different histories than their comic book counterparts. What's your process for writing and differentiating current comic book X-Men, like Jubilee and Dead X-Men, and their X-Men 97 counterparts? Steve says a huge help in switching between character depictions is relying on the voice actors of the show. To be honest, the original animated cast is so influential and impactful, hearing them in my head helps me lock into the specific depictions in the world of the cartoon. It also just comes down to the fact, that I've been reading since childhood, and I reread runs before I take on a new project. So when I'm writing animated Jubilee, I'm hearing Allison Court. When I'm writing Dead X-Men Jubes, I'm thinking of how much she matured over the years from Generation X to vampirism to surrogate motherhood. In most cases, the core of these characters are the same, but the animated versions are much closer to those cores, and the 616 iterations have been through other formative experiences that readers will expect to see reflected in their current depictions. What a great way and just an interesting deep dive to compare Jubilee as she currently stands in the X-Men's Krakoan line versus her animated appearance. The current X-Men slate of titles are so far into continuity that they're going to look nothing like X-Men 97. X-fan Sam Aaron said that in your last X-Men Monday appearance, you mentioned you were writing 4 or 5 different X-Men books during the same time period. First of all, are you okay? And second, why did the scheduling line up like that? It feels like so much at once. Props for you to being able to handle all that. Yes, oh my goodness, how much is Steve Folks writing right now? We have Heir of Apocalypse, we have Dead X-Men, X-Men 97. I feel like there's even maybe 1 or 2 books, I can't think of 2. Look, he even has a co-writer on X-Men Unlimited, so he's working on that book too. Steve says, I'm okay. I'm better than okay. Being busy writing X-Men comics is a pretty darn fun way to be busy, and it lined up the way it did because sometimes these things just happen. You get asked to do something because you're a good fit, and then another opportunity arises that you're also a good fit for, and it compounds. In this case, I have a co-writer on X-Men Unlimited with Steve Orlando. And we're in a transitional period with the line overall, so timing just gets a little funky sometimes. That said, for any editors in the audience, that overlap period is well behind me, and I am very available for new projects. Well, speaking of all these X projects, Dead X-Men 2 came out just last week. One of the coolest parts of the issue was finding out we're in Moira's seventh life. It's a known fact that early in the Krakoan era, there was a possibility of Al Ewing exploring Moira's many lives in a series. So, with that said, was Moira's Ultron filled seventh life a story nugget that had been kicking around the X Slack, or 100% Steve Folks? Wow, what an interesting way to approach a question coming in from AIPT. Let's see what Steve Folks has to say about Moira's seventh life. While I would have been first in line to read an Al Ewing Moira book, as would we have here, everything we see of Moira's lives in Dead X-Men beyond that was already established in House of X and Powers of 10. As a Folks idea developed with my editors and artistic collaborators, Jonathan Hickman established that when Moira killed off the Trask family, AI still rose anyway. So that was where I got the idea to show an Ultronified AI apocalypse. Yeah, very, very cool way to acknowledge continuity. It really feels like as I read some of these Steve Folks interviews, the way that he like approaches some of these new creators as a writer is to just reference and put these comic books in just so much context. The only cousin of an idea that I picked up from the past was that Jordan D. White, my ex-editor, mentioned there were some early talks about exploring more of Roberto in space that didn't progress the same way we saw in X-Men Red. That is not to say there's some master document of unused story ideas out there. It's really no more than what I just typed out. We have to be careful dropping these tidbits because fans like to imagine there's a big storyboard out there with all the paths not taken. But 99% of the time, we're referencing what amounts to a wouldn't it be cool if? But that nugget helped inspire putting an older Roberto on the Starjammers in Dead X-Men 1. That was a crazy, cool continuity idea. And I can definitely see going back over those X-Men Red issues, it feels like Roberto should have had a stronger presence in that book. He did have some great elements of characterization, but I would have loved to see more space adventures with him over the course series. Yeah, nobody except me totally agree. These Steve Folks interviews are so insightful. And I love the fact, too, that he talks about how the X Office works with some like discarded storylines across the publisher as well. In the Krakoan era, we've seen Emma interact with Kate Pryde, Miss Marvel, and of course, Tony Stark. But Jubilee and the other Generation X students, not so much. And even though it wasn't our Emma, it was touching to see an emotional interaction between her and Jubilee. Knowing how much of a Generation X fan you were, how excited were you to sneak this scene in? That scene with Jubilee and Emma was so important to me for a number of reasons. Admittedly, I'm a mega fan of Miss Frost, and I've only written her in a handful of panels. But it was also an opportunity to keep the stakes grounded and personal. When you're dealing with universe-spanning conflicts, it can be easy to lose that human touch. And one of the most central elements of these 5 mutants on this team is that they never forget that aspect. This might not be Jubilee's Emma, exactly, but that doesn't make it any easier to, and we got a little bit of a spoiler here as well, to watch Emma die in Jubilee's arms. The Dead X-Men aren't part of this mission because they're the strongest. They're part of the mission because they care and never lose sight of what they're doing or what they're doing. All right, what can you tease about Dead X-Men 3 on sale March 13th? Steve Folks says, you'll have to see what our 4 talented artists credited in this issue with Lin Yoshi, David Baldeon, and Javier Pina joining Bernard Chang. Javier Pina, we just got to see over from Birds of Prey. I feel like Pina is going to be such a natural fit in terms of Dead X-Men. I'm also thrilled to see that Bernard Chang is once again on the upcoming 3rd issue of the book. Chang is so great at depicting the animosity between the young X-Men characters. And it looks like these characters are set to explore some other lives of Moira McTaggart, and one of those lives might involve a shocking twist on the sort of X-Men teams we built before. We're also working towards a, dare I say it, betrayal. Finally, One more chance to tease. What can you share about the recently announced X-Men Blood Hunt Psylocke featuring Grey Crow? Steve says, I'm so excited Psylocke is public knowledge now. While I never feel entitled to anything, I admittedly would have been bummed out if I didn't get to do anything Blood Hunt related, since I keep a foot firmly planted in the horror world. And while the full story will have to wait for a future X-Men Monday, Quanin was at the top of my list of X characters I wanted to write but never had a chance to tackle. I absolutely love the relationship she formed with John Craycrow and Hellions. So the first question I asked when approached for this was if I could borrow the former Marauder too. I'm reuniting, what does that say? Here with Lin Yoshi, who drew the Sunfire arc of X-Men Unlimited and part of Dead X-Men 3. So it's a big thrill to get to work together on the big print issue. The covers and logos for these X-Men Blood Hunt issues are so cool. In fact, I wish the publisher maybe could utilize this for X-Men From the Ashes as opposed to Blood Hunt. In our one-shot, Psylocke and Grey Crow have gone to Japan for a chance to get away from it all for a little bit. But as the sky darkens, Quanin has to take up her blade. Japan doesn't actually have large collieries for vampire myths, but it does have a number of monsters and legends to make for interesting cousins to our traditional bloodsuckers. We're playing with the dichotomy between old Japan and new Japan. Vampire myths and urban legends for a very action-forward and dare I say romantic one-shot of bloodsucker carnage. X-Men fans named Psylocke and Grey Crow X-Men Monday's favorite X-Men couple of 2021. I'm sure a lot of readers are excited to hear that. But on that note, thanks for stopping by. Let's check in on some upcoming preview issues that Adventures in Poor Taste posts for upcoming X-Men books. And whenever we look at these panels, I always like to guess which future X-Men issues these are headed towards. For me, this looks like a panel of Emma Frost, maybe illustrated by Lucas Wernick for Fall of the House of X. And to me, this is looking like a Bernard Chang Jubilee for Dead X-Men. Really great image of Mr. Sinister, but I can't quite place which X-Men book it belongs to off the top of my head here. Here we go. We have a panel of Kamala Khan, I believe coming from Miss Marvel, The Mutant Menace Chapter 2. And a preview of what Sabretooth is up to in the main Wolverine book. Here's a cool panel from Magic in the most recent issue of X-Men Chapter 32 that was published this past Wednesday. I was going to say Monday, but nope. Marvel Comics come out on Wednesdays. Okay, so that is going to go ahead and bring us to the end of our stream today. I want to thank you guys so much for sticking aboard. I think we had a super fun stream. So our plan this week is over on Tuesday, we're going to have a review of the phenomenal Batman and Robin Chapter 7. Wednesday, we will be talking hopefully about some brand new X-Men titles. But I want to thank you so much for coming to check out our stream today, and I hope you have an excellent weekend. Thank you so much for spending this Sunday morning with me, and have a good one. Thank you so much.